As you're ready, gently bring yourself back. And we'll begin our question and answer program. So we find this is a practical and easy way to bring yourself into a meditative state fairly quickly. So how may we serve today? How is everybody?
Full moon last night, and it kind of felt like wanted to crawl into a hole and kind of hide.
So we're going to talk about the morning energy, which is actually Ardra Nakshatra. Full moon yesterday was in Mrigashira.
Here's the question.
Oh, so last night was a full moon and it was in Mrigashira, which is, there are 27 houses of the moon in Vedic astrology. And this morning, the moon is in Ardra Nakshatra, which for anyone who knows the zodiac, that's in the sign of Gemini. And so the energy that we're feeling this morning from the moon is in Ardra Nakshatra. It's a nakshatra of catharsis. The symbol of it is a teardrop. And it's the storm. And so we had a snowstorm last night. And so there is a dusting of snow on the earth in Portland. And that's very unusual. And the thing about Rudra, the image, Rudra is the deity of this nakshatra. And Rudra is an emanation of Shiva. Shiva is the masculine active force in Hindu mythology. And so Rudra is the stormy part of Shiva, and it's related to the star Betelgeuse. But the image of the feeling of Ardra Nakshatra is, if you ever saw the movie Forrest Gump, I know I'm dating myself, but in that movie, you know, he decides, and he and his friend, Lieutenant Dan, talk endlessly about how he's going to get a shrimp boat. And Lieutenant Dan says, if you get a shrimp boat, I'll be your partner, and we can get a shrimp boat together and have this shrimping business. Now, we all kind of knew that as he was saying that, he never thought Forrest Gump would get it together to get a shrimp boat, but he did. And so there was Lieutenant Dan with him, and they started shrimping, and they were completely unsuccessful. They were getting no shrimp. They'd go out every day. And then there was a storm, and they decided to stay with the boat during the storm. And the Ardra part is that during that storm, Lieutenant Dan climbs up the mast and kind of leashes himself, ties himself to the mast, and he is shaking his fist at God, going, "Is this all you've got? Give me everything you've got in this storm." And he's like totally, the effort to save the ship is, it's like he's willing to give his life in this effort. And this is Ardra, you're willing to give your life to understand whatever it is you're trying to understand, because Gemini is a sign that is ruled by Mercury. And so in this particular part of that sign, it's about intellectual understanding and being willing to do anything to get there. Einstein had his Mercury in this moon nakshatra. So it's, there is some creative genius here. And so there's that. And the storm is that when you are willing to do anything to make this happen, that's the energy of Ardra. And then the real thing is that there's a catharsis after the storm, which generally involves, it's like the tears that come after the crisis, or after the real change that you've been through. And then the tears are a release and a relaxation before the next nakshatra, which is Punarvasu, which is the return of the light. So these nakshatras are all related to each other. So anyway, this is the energy of the day. And so it feels a little bit like that. Is that anything like what you experienced in the?
It just felt like holding up, trying to, I don't know,
Staying out of the storm.
stay out of the storm,
Yeah. So we all know when you're in the storm, the place to be is not on the mast, but in the center of the energy, so that it happens around you instead of inside you. And so Paul very wisely holed up and was quiet. So this is where we are today. And in that calm after the storm, there's a still point. And we kind of hit that in our meditation this morning. And the energy of the day is ripe for that feeling, that finding the stillness, the calm after the storm. They talk about the calm before, but you know how it is after you've had an experience, a crisis experience, and then the tears of release. And then the calm, different kind of calm, because you've been through a big change emotionally. Just thought we'd share since everybody's a little quiet this morning. How may we serve today? We're so happy to be here. And like you, it's really easy to just sink into that calm and just kind of be. It's a little bit like floating on the surface of the water. So we want to talk a little bit about how to use that experience that we introduced you to this morning. You now know how to get to the center fairly quickly. And then once you have arrived, the thing to do is to begin the other practice we've been doing before, which is bring in the golden light and expand. So you first take yourself into the stillness, which we did, and then you expand that. And this will bring in a whole new set of experiences for you.
Becky, is there a way that we can center or set or prepare ourselves for the solstice and the energy that is the return? I don't even know what I'm asking per se, but how do we really take advantage of the energy that's going to come to us with the solstice? If that's even the right question.
Well, it's very naturally happening that the nakshatras are setting us up for the return of the light. Let me see, today is the 19th. And is the solstice on the 21st?
Yeah, Tuesday.
So tomorrow, Monday, is Punavarsu, the return of the light. And then Tuesday is Pusha Nakshatra. Pusha is the udder of a cow, and it is the nourishment that is available to everyone. It's the capacity to generate the energy to nourish everyone. And so that will be the energy on Tuesday, is nourishment. And that nourishment is to allow us to, it's, you know, a person who's starving can't go to God because all they can think about is food, because they need it for survival. So they're stuck in a survival level. But in Pusha Nakshatra, where everything that's needed is available for nourishment, and this frees us to go to the center of our union with divinity, because the support is there in the atmosphere. We don't have to worry about our survival. We can forget about that and enjoy the fruits of our labor, which has brought us to this moment where we can experience the stillness within ourselves, which is the union, the junction point with our energy and divine love, that which is beyond love, peace, joy, and gratitude, becomes available from that stillness where our mind is quiet, our body's quiet, and we are completely expanded at one with the whole. And in beginning to establish ourselves there so that that feels like home. That's our practice. Does that answer your question, Brenda? How may we serve further? Andrew?
Do you think that it can be part of our karma to make bad choices?
So the question is, do we think it can be part of our karma to make bad choices? And the answer is, of course. Because what is karma but the matrix of belief that we have yet to unravel in ourselves? And so that matrix of belief, that unexamined matrix of belief, is what limits us. And so we could call that, in a way, bad karma. There's nothing bad about it. It's just that it limits us so that we aren't experiencing our union with love itself, with love, peace, joy, gratitude, and that which is beyond. That experience is not available until we cultivate it by releasing the matrix of belief that doesn't serve us. And another word for that is karma. The karma is the cause of our misbehavior. So if we look at our misbehavior as the fruits of our matrix of belief, then it all kinds of fits together how karma, behavior, matrix of belief all interact together to create more karma, so that we get more feedback, so that we examine that matrix of belief that causes us to keep repeating the behaviors that don't work, which dig us deeper and deeper into the rut of repeating a pattern that can't work. But it sometimes takes us a whole lifetime of repetition before we start to get that maybe we have a different choice. Maybe there's a different choice to be made. And that capacity for different choice is cultivated by examining the, for want of a better word, we'll call it a strain pattern that keeps repeating itself and bringing us the same result over and over. Have you ever noticed that there are particular patterns that kind of repeat themselves in cycles in our lives? You know, for Rebecca, because relationship is a very important part of her karmic work in this particular life, she attracted the same kind of relationship for many, many years in various forms until finally it could be seen and resolved. And so we all have important areas of our life that do that. It may be our career that some pattern repeats over and over and over. Maybe our relationship, may be a pattern we have in our family. I mean, these patterns are throughout our lives, and it helps to identify them and do ho'oponopono into the center of whatever it is that we would like to change about ourselves. Ho'oponopono creates the alignment with our highest self that allows us to cultivate the feedback from these situations so that we can begin to see more clearly. And in that clarity, we can release those patterns and they no longer entertain our mind and kind of make our choices for us. And in that way, we become free. This is why it's called liberation, because we are freed from that false matrix of belief, which keeps us from alignment with the all that is, which is our birthright. The love, peace, joy, gratitude, and that which is beyond, which becomes available as we align ourselves with pure raw love itself. And it helps to understand that we don't even really know what that experience is, to bring a certain innocence to our work so that we are open and available for new experience to show itself to us. Many times because of fear, usually, but it could be any emotion. Sometimes it's pride. It can be really any negative emotion. We lose our innocence in the face of this availability of alignment. And we get a little bit cynical, and that blocks our capacity to experience the awe and wonder of what we truly are. And most of these things at this point in our lives are self-inflicted wounds. Fortunately, I think we can safely say that everyone on this call is in a situation where they are free to work on their liberation internally. Having this freedom is really the greatest gift a human being can be given in this life. The freedom to explore our relationship to the divine. What a great gift. No one deserves it, and everyone deserves it. It is our birthright. It's not something we can earn exactly. But now that you're here, allow yourself to drop into that experience of union. And, if your mind starts to bother you with distractions, you can always say Ho'oponopono to your highest self. And if you run out of things to try to heal with it, it doesn't matter. It still works. And the thing about Ho'oponopono is it's in the now moment. So there is no past. When you're saying it without a topic, there is no past or future. You're just now. Thank you. I love you. I'm sorry. I love you. I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry. I love you. It's magic. Well, you know, they always talk about the calm before the storm. We're beginning to think that's because everybody falls asleep after the storm. So we don't talk about the calm after the storm because we're resting. Yes.
I guess I need some clarification because from what you first said, which maybe I misunderstood, you're saying that basically that the alignment of the planets when we're born is a matrix of belief, or that our aligning ourselves with our belief about this, whether we know what our astrology is or not, is a matrix of belief. In other words, if we're, you know, whatever, if our karma is to live on the streets and starving, that's a matrix of belief, or is that we, I just confused where matrix of belief comes into this.
Well, matrix of belief becomes relevant if we want to change. If we are content with the life we've been given, and many people are, or don't have the opportunity to examine our matrix of belief because we are completely consumed by survival, by what it takes just to survive in this world. I mean, the example could be somebody born into a war zone. You know, it doesn't matter, they could have the greatest chart in the world, but there's no way they're going to be able to express it or access it because of the circumstances they've been born into. And so we can call that karma. It's a certain kind of, there are all these different kinds of karma in Vedic astrology.
The language thing. So
Yes.
my question is then, what's the advantage of somebody knowing their astrology?
The advantage of knowing the astrology, knowing your personal astrology, is that on a day like this, you can begin to understand your experience in a different context, in a bigger context, and begin to understand how to work with the energies of your particular astrology in the context of the whole, so that when, for example, Pluto might be aspecting your sun. Pluto is this, you know, Pluto is plutonium. It's radioactive energy that is very dark, very heavy, and the energy is of death and rebirth. And so, you know, and it's really deep. It's not this superficial thing. It could take your life. It could. But it doesn't always. So, you know, you can't, it's not exactly predictable, but knowing that that energy is functioning in a given moment in your life can give context for a sudden, you know, it depends on where it happens, but you could have a sudden career change. You could have a sudden change in relationship. You could have a sudden, you know, death and rebirth in any part, any aspect of your life. And it helps you to understand that it's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong exactly. It's an experience that has become available, and how you react to it, how you deal with it has everything to do with what happens next. And when you have a profound change like that, that comes seemingly out of nowhere, we generally are searching for cause. And the first thing that our mind can link it to, that's what we blame. And it's usually something outside of us. And so it creates this cascade of reactivity that we then become responsible for because we created it. If, however, we understand that whatever change is happening is because it's been generated through the stars, and it's not exactly that we're innocent bystander, but we feel these waves of energy as not necessarily emanating from us. And so our whole understanding of how we interact and where we find our ground as we go through these changes becomes very different. Our perspective becomes very different. We are no longer just a victim of the tides, we could say. I mean, all of us experience the moon, and especially women, when our cycles in past, present, or future are attuned to that cycle in such a way that we can't deny it. You know, those forces are still acting on us dramatically. That's just one that we, it's so obvious in our bodies for most of our lives that we take it for granted. And even then, we don't really appreciate what it has to do with the forces of nature around us. So knowing the astrology gives you an opportunity to participate with the forces of nature with more awareness. It doesn't mean that it explains everything. Doesn't explain everything. But it explains enough that we can participate. The more we know, the more we can participate, rather than feeling like we're a victim. And so what does matrix of belief have to do with this? Matrix of belief is when we blame everybody else for everything. That's the first stage of matrix of belief that we can deal with by taking responsibility and saying, oh, maybe this has something to do with my behavior. And when we start to do that, then we start to begin to take responsibility for our behavior and watch what effect it has in the world, and maybe change our mind about who and what we want to participate in and how we want to participate. Because what it's really about is changing ourselves from victim to participant to witness to a different kind of participation where we are consciously acting to uplift everything we can in our environment, everything and everyone. So this matrix of belief and our embracing the willingness to participate in the expression of our lives from a deeper and deeper, more and more aligned place, so that our participation in life changes from victim to awareness to participating in a way that uplifts. So that's how we would describe the process that becomes available in consciously addressing matrix of belief. Now, this is leaving out the word grace. And grace is really, really important, because grace is the thing that just comes into our life and suddenly we meet Annassa, or we meet some other kind of mentor, or we run into some program that changes our life, or we meet some other person who really begins to waken us to what's available. And that is just a gift from God. That the only word for that is grace. Or we'll say the goddess, because really that stillness from which everything emanates, that's Shakti. That's the feminine principle. And that's the holding of everything. That space of pure raw love. And then the union of Shiva and Shakti. That's the place of our divinity. And that's the place where the in-breath and the out-breath meet. And it is the place where life and death meet. And every new in-breath is a rebirth. And every out-breath is a re-death. And as above, so below. And the microcosm and the macrocosm are the same throughout. Inhale, exhale, expand, contract. This is life. And then the witness, becoming a witness, takes us into the center of it all. And liberation is knowing you have a choice. And then you make your choice and you understand that you're responsible. That's karma. How may we serve further? that answer your question?
I think so. It seems to me that karma itself is not the matrix of belief, but that feeling like you're a victim of your karma, or that you richly deserve grace, is a matrix of belief.
So what he said is that matrix of belief and karma are not the same, but feeling like you're a victim of your karma is matrix of belief.
Yeah.
And feeling like you deserve grace is a matrix of belief. Yes. We completely agree with those statements. Karma itself is, it's, in the Vedas, they talk about it as the laws of karma. And there are all these different kind of karmas. There's karmas that you're born with. There's karmas that you create. There's karmas that are to manifest in the future. And there's a different name for each one of them. And there are more than I have said. I haven't studied this thoroughly. And I'm not sure if I ever will. I might. But and they're considered laws, and they're descriptions of what actually happens to people. And so the limitation is still always linear language in the field of the nonlinear. Because whenever we start to talk about interacting with that which is beyond love, peace, joy, and gratitude, we are talking about quantum reality, but we're bringing our linear mind to try to understand it. And it doesn't fit. Quantum reality, which has as its foundation the fundamental experience of that which is beyond love, peace, joy, and gratitude. Because we have no words, we have no linear language that can contain that experience. That experience is beyond our language. It's beyond our mental comprehension. It can only be experienced by that which is non-linear within us, which is source energy, pure light. And so to experience that state, we have to become pure energy. We don't have to experience ourselves as light, but we have to experience ourselves as energy. And then whichever sense within us is the strongest will be able to create some linear description of that experience, but that still won't be able to invoke the experience in another person because it's still foundationally linear when we reduce it to something we can talk about. So this is our problem in trying to communicate with you. We are trying to teach you about something for which there is no language. There is only experience. Experience beyond language. And so our senses can get it, but for each one of us, because our primary senses are different, we're going to experience it differently. The way they talk about it in India is you put your hand on an elephant. Wherever you're standing, you put your hand there and then you describe it. And you can have 10 people standing around that elephant, and each one is going to describe something very, very different. But they're all describing elephant. Sorry, we see that added more confusion than enlightenment. So,
I do have a follow-up or
oh,
tag
great.
on to that. So the question posted is, or the point is to ask you to please say more about simultaneous lifetimes.
Oh,
It's a
simultaneous
hard
lifetime.
concept.
Yes,
Yeah.
we've been talking about that for a few weeks. So the only thing relevant to us about simultaneous lifetimes is that in these death and rebirth experiences that become available to us through our how do we say it? As we become more aligned within ourselves, when we are experiencing a death and rebirth experience, there sometimes becomes the opportunity to jump from one lifeline to another. We're going to say it in a different way. So what happens is that there is the opportunity to receive the gifts from a different time, a life lived at a different time, which happens simultaneously to the life we're living now. And if we understand that all the lives we have ever lived are simultaneous, and as we work deeper and deeper within ourselves, the opportunities to attract the gifts from prior lives become magnetized toward us. It's a kind of gravitational pull as our field becomes clearer and clearer and clearer. We become like a gravitational field for the attracting the experiences from our past lives that could further serve the whole. As we become more and more light, we become an attractive force for other connected streams of experience to pour into us and inform us of their gifts. In spiritual practice, these are often called siddhis or spiritual gifts.
But it must go the other way with darkness.
The way it goes with darkness is that the intensification of the darkness requires that we make a change. Because the darkness becomes unbearable when it magnifies itself. And the darkness is contraction and the light is expansion. So the contraction gets
because you can feed off of both. It's like a change in polarity. But you're feeding, for lack of a better word.
No,
So
let's look for the language. It is the experience of hopelessness that has within it the potential for going straight to the light. That's the only thing relevant about that experience. That's the only thing important about that experience. Anything else becomes victim. That's what we'll say about that. The intensity of the darkness leads to hopelessness, which leads to surrender. And then the light just pours in. That's how it works.
so that could be a gift.
Could be. Could be the biggest gift there is. That's called the dark night of the soul.
How many of those do you need? It depends on your karma.
Was that a real question?
A little flippant.
Yeah.
It just seems to me that, I think people are born with a certain life force. And so darkness seems to be a consumer of life force. And then, light is a it nourishes life force. But it seems like there's some people that the darkness will consume them very quickly. And they'll just be extinguished. And you can observe that. And then with our other people, you've just got all this shit to feed this darkness. And it's just, you just keep on feeding it. Until you're finally extinguished. But I don't know.
Well, we're not exactly following the feeding the darkness. So the question is about darkness and light and how they interact. And the observation that some people are consumed or extinguished by darkness. And we would say that sometimes people have all kinds of ways of avoiding knowing the truth about themselves because they fear the pain and they have no idea that there is a process of evolution that is possible when one begins to embraces the practice of Ho'oponopono. This is a way of bringing our darkness to the light. Bringing our limitations and obstructions to the light itself within us, which is our source of being. So we bring those obstructions forward. We welcome our awareness of them because we understand that whatever darkness that arises in us, that we can bring to the light with Ho'oponopono, releases us from the chains of that obstruction so that we become more light. And that is the really important thing to know, is that when darkness arises, we have the opportunity to say Ho'oponopono to our highest self through that darkness, and therefore become more light. And many of us have, well, they say the layers of an onion, but we really see is this multidimensional circle that has, similar to a pond when you put a stone in it, it has these waves. And when we begin dissolving the waves, then we get more flow as we get closer to the center, and then it starts to wash itself out. But we're starting out here, dissolving the waves. And all of us, we've all had thousands of lives to be on this call. So, there are a fair number of waves between the outside and the inner core. And so, if we're an optimist, Rebecca's an eternal optimist. We get through a wave and we think, phew, that was big. Now I'm here, And so the potential can sort of build on itself. If we can sort of sense where we are, and we take that sensation as a fact that, if we can only go at a particular speed, then we calculate that there are, thousands more lifetimes before we're going to get to the center. And so we kind of spin steady every day. And so what if we only get this far in this life? So what? Who cares? We do. You want to get as far as you can. Just because knowing God feels so good. I mean, we're all after the reward of ecstasy without taking a pill, which doesn't mean, I don't know, we've never taken the ecstasy pill, so we don't know what we're saying. But, but it does feel good to be in the presence of our life force when it's clear. That's what we're talking about as ecstasy. That we do know something about. And that's the potential for even 1 second. And what happens is that this is not a linear experience. You know, this is a slice of a whole, but it doesn't work like that. The way energy works is you can have an experience of the complete center. You can have that complete experience from suicidal or homicidal. They're the same. There's just one turned inside out. You can be in rage, total rage, and Ho'oponopono can take you to God from that state. It's a very intense state. That's the Pluto state. That's it. That's life and death. You're right on the cusp of both. And you choose light from there, you're there. There is no place from which light is not a choice. None. Because it's what we are. And it's not a linear process that takes us to the light, because the light itself is not linear. So we can create great limitation for ourselves by assuming it's a linear process, and therefore it's going to take many, many lifetimes.
Rebecca,
Go ahead.
oh, sorry. Is there a lifeline or possible world in which Jesus isn't sacrificed?
So is there a lifetime, a lifeline, or a possible world where Jesus isn't sacrificed? Well, all religions that come to this earth arrive with the purpose of empowering every person to become aligned with divinity. That original intention of the arrival of that religion is always subverted into something that's used to inspire fear, to make people controllable. So the Bible was written hundreds of years after Jesus existed. So as we've said repeatedly in the last few weeks, if you've ever played the game telephone with only 10 people and you whisper something in one person's ear and they whispered in the next person's ear, and you ask the 10th person to say what they said, and then the first person to say what they said, they are usually wildly differing experiences, wildly differing words. So you can be sure that a document written hundreds of years after an event or series of events is going to be quite a bit different from what actually happened, and that it may have a very different intention than what the actual story was or set of stories. You know, we have so many experiences in one day of our lives at the pace of that we're subjected to now with so much information. It's anyway, what we say about any religion is that, you know, after thousands of years, it doesn't resemble its inception at all. And so we don't even want to embrace that particular view of sacrifice and martyrdom, because in reality, what we sacrifice to know God, to know the goddess, to come into union, is we sacrifice all our delusion about what's real. And the idea that a person could be sacrificed to save all of us, it's an illusion. It's a way of letting ourselves off the hook to actually do our own work, to come into union. And in embracing that fantasy, then, you know, we spend our life in a different way. And that's a choice. It doesn't mean that Christianity at its inception, and that some of the things that are attributed to Jesus were not said, that some of those experiences didn't happen, but it's so far. There is something in Christianity called Christ consciousness, which is real. Christ consciousness is the same as that which is beyond. But it's not about victim and martyrdom or somebody else doing something that makes it better for everybody. The something that people can do that makes it better for everybody is become aligned so that you are participating in the upliftment of the whole, yourself, completely responsible, completely participating and doing the best you can. And the truth about everybody that we've met is that people are doing the best they can. They are. And just changing our mind enough to acknowledge that uplifts every person we meet, because they truly are innocent, even though our life experience would have everyone guilty of whatever we're accusing them of. because that's our matrix of belief. Yes. So we're becoming aware of the time. We don't seem to have it close by anywhere. Oh, like we're really at time. We missed our whole meditation. So
That was a meditation.
well, we did do a very profound meditation at the beginning, and we encourage you to practice it because it's a way to take yourself right to the stillness and then expand from there. So we would like next time to hear from somebody, at least, what their experiences were practicing this new meditation and the expansion. So please, pay a little bit of attention and let's have some conversation about that next time. We have so totally enjoyed being with you today. It's a great gift to have these conversations. And we are so glad that you come. Thank you so, so much. Till next time. Bye for now.